Hi, remote painters. Today I want to give you some helpful hints in starting your acrylic painting. Um, One of the biggest things that you want to keep in mind is that you want to paint from the background and keep layering the paint until you get to the foreground. Now, you can see that I've done some of the background for mine. Here's my reference picture. And there's my background. And now I'm starting to work on, is part of a fish. I'm starting to work on the fins. So what I had to decide is what is the background of the fin and what would be closer to me. And I decided that the blue is really the background color, and then the orange and the black are kind of layered on top of the blue. So then I had to decide, well, am I gonna paint this entire thing blue and then try to paint the orange shapes over it? Or am I gonna paint paint in the blue shapes and then paint the orange around the blue? And I decided, since this is such a complex pattern, that I would just paint the blue shapes independently, and then I'll go over it and touch up the edges and get everything nice and neat when I do the orange. So I'm gonna need a lot of blue paint. So I mixed up the blue paint in a little cup that I can then put a lid on. And if you don't have a little cup like this at home with a lid, you could always just put it in like a Dixie cup or just any old container and put like some tinfoil over it or some saran wrap over it. So what I want to show you is basically I'm going to take my blue and I'm going to do one of these shapes and show you how, because it's not just a flat area of blue, there's some variation, like there's some lighter areas. So I just want to show you how you can blend that just a little bit. So I'm going to do this big shape right here. So I am going to start with my blue paint, and you want to hold your paintbrush like you would hold a pen or a pencil to start out. And you don't need to glob the paint on really, really thick, but you don't want to, put it on so thin that it's see-through. Now, while it's still wet, that's the key if you want to blend colors. While it's still wet, I am going to take a different brush, a smaller brush, and I'm going to get some white on it. And I'm just making sure it's clean and drying it a little bit on my paper towel up here. I can actually show you. So there's my water container, and I have paper towels to dry my brush on. All right, so I'm going to take a little bit of white, and at first this is gonna look like not that great, and you just have to trust the process, that it's gonna look good if you do it right in the end. Okay, so I am going to start to put some white in here along this kind of top edge. And as you can see, it doesn't look very good, like in terms of being blended. It looks kind of messy, okay? But I'm gonna go back in and I'm gonna keep working at it. So I'm going to try to blend it by kind of following the contour. Okay, so I'm blending it a little. Now I'm gonna go back and I'm washing my brush again. Wash, wash, wash. And now I'm gonna dry my brush because I don't really want any water added to the paint. And I'm gonna take some of this blue and I'm gonna kind of start to blend it the other way. So now instead of blending the white into the blue, I'm kind of blending the blue into the white. My brush just got a little bit of water on it. And I'm just gonna go back and forth. And one nice thing about doing the background to the foreground is if I'm getting some of this blue in areas where I don't want it, when I do the orange over it, it's going to cover. Now, I did bring a little too much of the white down here, so I'm just taking a little more of this blue and I'm gonna blend it back in. And if I need to have the tiniest bit of water on my brush to get things to flow a little more smoothly, I can do that. Okay, so you can see how it started out and now it's kind of nicely blended and it's a little lighter on one side. And I'm just gonna blend it a tiny bit more. Now, one thing you wanna remember about acrylic paints is that they actually dry darker than they are when they're wet. So anything you do is gonna be a little darker when it's dry, which is kind of the opposite of most other paints, like poster paints and things like that. Okay, so I have gotten my blue shape and I've kind of blended it a little bit. So I would just continue doing that. Now, once I get to all my blue shapes done, then I would start on my orange shapes. And you're gonna have to look at your picture and figure out, you know, what's, like I said, the background and how you're gonna build towards the foreground. So what I have done is I have mixed up already some colors here. And let me show you these. So I've got kind of a yellowy orange and kind of a red orange. And you don't have to try to copy your photograph exactly. You're just kind of using it as the starting point. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some of this, and I actually think I need some more yellow in it. Plus it's starting to get a little bit dry. Now, if you're using your colors and they start to seem like they're getting a little bit dry, you can take a couple drops of water from your water container and just mix those in, just to kind of keep it nice and smooth and liquidy so that you can use it. And another nice thing about acrylics is if you make a mistake and you don't like the way something looks, you can just let it dry and then you can paint over it. Okay, so I'm just gonna start to paint in this yellowy orange color. And again, I'm holding my paintbrush like a pencil. And one thing I notice is that this color is not opaque, meaning I can see through it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some white and I'm gonna add white to it. White will make any color more opaque. It will make it lighter too, so you kind of have to balance those two things, but it will make it opaque so that it will cover what's underneath it. And you know, it may not make it opaque enough, and you may need to do 2 layers, you may need to do 3 layers to get it to cover what you need it to cover. So let's see here if this is more opaque. Oh yes, it's much better. And I can clean up those edges there. And you know, you can see that I'm kind of doing this in an order I normally wouldn't, because normally I would do all the blue spots before I started doing the orange. But just to show you, I'm kind of doing it out of order, okay? And then in the photograph, there's a lot of darker oranges as well. So again, while that's still wet, kind of like I did with the blue, I can come in with some of the darker oranges and I can start to blend those in. And again, you guys, you're not trying to perfectly copy the photograph. You're just using it as a starting point. But what you do want to kind of do is try to get the colors as close as you can. This is a color mixing project, so you really want to try to get your colors correct. And one thing you can do to really try to make sure your colors are correct is if you take your color and you actually, let me make sure you guys can see, actually touch your paint to your reference picture and compare and say, okay, yeah, that looks pretty good. And if it's a little lighter, like you can see my paint's a little lighter right here, that's okay, because remember, it's going to dry a little bit darker. All right, so I'm just going to continue on putting in my oranges. And it's actually a little bit brighter over here. So I'm gonna continue on. We are gonna be working on this painting for a few weeks. So, you know, you wanna take your time. You don't wanna rush through it. It's gonna be a big learning experience. You're gonna get frustrated here and there, and you're gonna do things and go, oh, that doesn't look good, and then you'll have to go back and change it and fix it. But that's okay, because that's the learning and painting process. I'm just drying my brush because it had some water on it. You can see I'm blending this. I hope you can see I'm blending it. Okay, and I'm just working my way, you know, through, okay? All right, so once again, just quick reminder, make sure you're painting from the background to the foreground. and you have to do some problem solving, you know, figuring out where is my background, what seems like it's furthest away, what seems like it's closer. Make sure that you mix a little water into your paints to keep them fluid on the palette, and know that if you make a mistake, you just let it dry and then you can paint over it. Okay? All right, so get going, give it a try, and have fun. That's it.